If you have ever spent a night in the sleeper of an old long-nose rig, you already know the feeling. The mattress is maybe an inch of foam over a steel platform. The ceiling is somewhere between 24 and 36 inches above your face. You cannot sit up. You cannot change clothes standing. You cannot do much of anything except lie flat and hope the parking lot is quiet. 3 days into a Chicago to Los Angeles run, your back has stopped forgiving you, and the cab starts to feel less like a workplace and more like a cell. This was the standard. Kenworth had been building factory sleepers since 1933, and in the 43 years that followed, the bunk had grown from 18 inches to 48 inches, but the roof had never gone up. In 1976, that changed. This is the story of how Kenworth put a raised roof on a truck and turned the long-haul cab into something a driver could actually live in. The sleeper cabs started as a favor and then became a fixture. In 1933, Kenworth became the first manufacturer to offer an integrated factory sleeper, a padded bunk built into the space behind the driver, still inside the main cab, open to the driving area. It was simple, it was short, and for its time, it was revolutionary. Before the factory sleeper, long-haul drivers built their own. Wooden boxes behind the cab, padded benches welded to the frame, a pillow draped over the steering wheel when the coffee ran out. Kenworth's 1933 offering gave drivers something the industry had never given them before, a place to lie down flat. In 1947, Kenworth went a step further and introduced the first walled-off sleeper compartment, separating the bunk from the driving area so a co-driver could rest while the truck stayed on the highway. Team driving became possible. Load times shrank. Freight moved faster. Other manufacturers followed. Freightliner's 1953 WF-64 put the bunk directly over the dashboard and front seats, an overhead compartment born not from comfort, but from federal length regulations that capped the tractor-trailer combination. Every inch spent on the cab was an inch taken away from the trailer, and in a business measured by cargo capacity, the sleeper fought for its life against the cargo hold. That pressure shaped an entire generation of sleepers. Through the 1950s and the 1960s, bunks grew from 18 inches long to around 48 inches, and by the 1970s, they had picked up windows, padding, storage compartments, and privacy curtains. But the ceiling never moved. The sleeper stayed flat because the cab stayed flat, and the cab stayed flat because every additional foot of height was a negotiation the factories were not willing to have. By the mid-1970s, the constraint and the reality were pulling in opposite directions. The interstate highway system had reached substantial completion. Routes ran 3,000 to 4,000 miles. Owner-operators were spending 250 nights a year in the cab, sometimes more. The trucking industry had grown into the artery of American commerce, and the sleeper behind the driver's seat had not grown with it. You could live in that sleeper. You just could not live well. In 1976, for the American Bicentennial, Kenworth built a limited edition package called the VIT 200, the letters standing for Very Important Trucker. It was offered on both the K100 cab-over and the W900 conventional, and it was the first production truck anywhere to put a raised roof over the sleeper. The bicentennial framing made it look like a marketing moment. It was more than that. Above the standard cab line, the Aerodyne added a pod about a foot high, integrated cleanly into the sheet metal, capped with skylight windows on the K100 and twin vista windows on the W900. The raised section let daylight into what had previously been a dark compartment. More importantly, it let a driver stand. A man who spent 300 nights a year in the cab could finally change his shirt without hunching. He could sit at the edge of the bunk with his feet on the floor and his head clear of the ceiling. He could move. The name Aerodyne carried a second meaning. On the K100, which was a cab-over-engine design with the driver positioned directly above the front axle, the raised roof served as a wind deflector for the trailer behind. The squared-off leading edge of a box trailer creates substantial aerodynamic drag at highway speed, and the Aerodyne's raised profile caught air before it caught the trailer, smoothing the transition. The styling solved a comfort problem and an efficiency problem at the same time. The engineering was not trivial. A cab-over-cab tilts forward for engine service, and adding a raised roof meant re-engineering the sheet metal, the glazing, and the structural mounts to preserve the tilt function while carrying the new volume. Kenworth announced the Bicentennial Limited Edition and gifted one of the first customs to Evel Knievel, a piece of the 1970s publicity that put the truck on television screens and in magazine spreads across the country. The bicentennial year ended. The limited edition ended. The raised roof stayed. In 1977, Kenworth moved the Aerodyne from FYT 200 limited edition status into regular production. It became available on both K100 and W900 with 2 interior packages. Splendor was the upmarket standard, and VIT was the top tier, a name that would stay in the Kenworth catalog for the next 5 decades to denote the highest trim configuration in any cab. What had been a bicentennial gimmick became a baseline expectation. Fleet operators ordered Aerodynes because their drivers demanded them. Owner-operators ordered them because they were the ones sleeping in them. The extra volume made amenities possible that had been impossible in the coffin bunk. Refrigerators were installed, small wardrobes were added, storage cabinets lined the walls where only sheet metal had been before. Some drivers installed televisions, small cooking setups, and carpet. The truck started to look less like a workplace and more like a cabin. The industry noticed. Other manufacturers introduced their own raised roof sleepers through the late 1970s and the 1980s, and by the end of the decade, the raised roof sleeper was no longer an option. It had become the expectation. Kenworth itself kept expanding the concept. The Aerocab and Aerodyne II in 1994, the 74-inch Studio Sleeper in 1993, the 86-inch Studio Sleeper in 1998. Each was a descendant of the decision made in the 1976 model year. The cultural ratification came quickly. In February 1979, NBC premiered BJ and the Bear, a weekly series built around a red and white Kenworth K100C Aerodyne and a chimpanzee co-driver. For 3 seasons, the Aerodyne cab was treated on television as what it had already become in reality. Not just a truck, but a home on wheels. The show ran from 1979 to 1981, and by the time it left the air, the raised roof sleeper was no longer a Kenworth innovation. It was an American one. 43 years of flat-roofed sleepers ended in a single model year. The K100 Aerodyne did not add horsepower. It did not improve the engine. It did not change how the drivetrain worked or how the brakes felt on a grade. What it changed was quieter and more important than any of that. It made the truck a place a driver could actually live in, and in doing so, it made the modern long-haul lifestyle possible. Every raised roof sleeper on an American highway today, the Kenworth Studio, the Peterbilt Ultraloft, the Freightliner Cascadia, the Volvo V NL860, traces its lineage back to the 1976 decision to put a bubble on top of a K100. Drivers who remember the coffin bunk know exactly what was gained. Drivers who never spent a night in one have the Aerodyne to thank for that. The Aerodyne didn't just give drivers a place to sleep, it gave them a place to live.